Tonight, national secrets at risk.
A senior RCMP official under arrest.
The obtained, stored, processed, sensitive information.
What we know about the charges, the accused, and the damage control.
This has been my life.
New details of Kaillie Humphries' allegations against a coach and Bobsleigh Canada.
Creating a champion. We'll take a second look at Bianca Andreescu's amazing run.
And out on the campaign trail, politics, parties, and problem candidates.
There's no excuse for this to happen.
This is The National.
A senior director working with the RCMP is in custody tonight, charged with taking some of this country's secrets. Now, Canadian intelligence and government officials are searching for answers. Which secrets? What happened to them? And how far might the damage spread? Now, in a story this sensitive, a lot of those answers are in the shadows, but Salima Shivji outlines what we know.
An arrest that's shaken not only the RCMP, but the entire intelligence community to its core. A senior civilian with the force's intelligence team in custody, charged under Canada's rarely used Security of Information Act.
The allegations are that he obtained, stored, processed sensitive information, we believe with the intent to communicate it to people that he shouldn't be communicating it to.
Cameron Ortis, an expert in East Asian affairs, computers, and cybersecurity, is facing allegations dating back to February 2015. Accused of communicating sensitive information and gathering more this past year with the intent of selling it to a foreign government. Ortis had access to enough secrets to be bound to secrecy for life.
Classified intelligence from Canadian law enforcement and security services, but also allied information. So see, he had some of the broadest access that you get in the RCMP. So for me, it really comes down to what he took and what he was intending to do with it.
A nightmare scenario. His arrest, sources say, set federal departments scrambling to assess the possible damage, even forcing a comment on the campaign trail.
I can assure you that the authorities are taking this extremely seriously. But you might understand, I have no comment to make.
Charges under this act are rare. In 2012, a former Navy intelligence officer pleaded guilty to selling secrets to Russia. Another case of a Canadian man accused of trying to spy for China is still in the courts after nearly 6 years, because, experts say, of a delicate balancing act.
This is a case about official secrets, basically, and the leakage of official secrets. And so the government has an interest, of course, in being able to prosecute successfully, but at the same time they have to balance that against not wanting to divulge information in public, in public trial, which this has to be.
Salima, what more can you tell us about what the implications might be here?
Well, Andrew, as you say, there are a lot of questions here. The RCMP won't say whether Ortis is still with the force, and we still don't know what type of secrets we're talking about here. Were allegedly compiled, gathered, was their intent to sell, and to sell to whom? Such a high level of clearance means it could take a lot of time to track, but this could be potentially very embarrassing for Canadian intelligence. There could be political fallout because Canada's intelligence services are very closely linked to our Five Eyes partners. We share sensitive information with countries like the UK, Australia, and the United States. So they will all be watching this case very carefully with interest to see just how big a breach this could be. Ortis, meanwhile, could face up to 37 years in prison if convicted. The most serious of the charges that he is facing faces up to 14 years in prison.
Salima Shivji, thanks very much.
Since the CBC broke the story about Kaillie Humphries last night, there are now more questions about why. Why Canada's most decorated Olympian bobsledder is suing to leave the country to compete for the United States. CBC sports reporter Devin Haru has the complaint and the coach at the heart of the story.
Kaillie Humphries alleges this man, her coach, Todd Hayes, verbally and mentally abused her during the 2017-2018 season.
And it's certainly not fair that I'm getting punished time and time again.
Hayes is a head coach of Canada's national bobsleigh team. Last August, Humphries filed a harassment complaint with the organization. Since then, he's stayed and she's stayed away.
I've made it very well known. I want to be back. I want to be competing. I didn't want this to end my career.
Kaillie Humphries.
Bobsleigh Canada says its internal investigation is still ongoing. Humphries says the organization has taken too long and has blocked her request to be released from the team, and now she's suing them, spelling out her complaints in court documents filed this week. Humphries alleges Hayes verbally attacked her personally and professionally, and that she was astonished by what Hayes was saying.
It's really hard.
CBC has also learned 2 former athletes coached by Hayes during his time with USA Bobsled also filed misconduct reports with Safe Sport. Todd Hayes was physically, verbally, and mentally abusive during his tenure, and although the team won medals, his behavior had lasting effects on his athletes, including myself, said one of the former athletes coached by Hayes. Safe Sport won't comment on individual cases, and today, Bobsleigh Canada responded on Hayes' behalf. As the matter is now in the courts, there will be no comment from Todd Hayes until this is wrapped up. It has yet to file a statement of defense.
I need to be the best athlete I can be and go where it's safe, it's conducive, where I'm respected.
Humphries has given the organization until Wednesday to release her from the program. She plans to attend a U.S. training camp next Thursday. Devin Haru, CBC News, Toronto.
You probably got a sense of it there. Humphries is clearly torn about this. Representing Canada has defined her career as a fierce competitor, a flag bearer, and on the podium. Online, some have characterized her move as a betrayal, but among many Canadian athletes, she's found support. Aaron Collins gets some of that reaction firsthand.
Olympic medalists from Canada are in a select club. Jen Kish is a member, winning bronze playing rugby in Rio. She's also a friend of Kaillie Humphries.
She's a Canadian icon who has won this country 3 Olympic medals.
Kish, who's retired, says many athletes likely support Humphries' move to the U.S., but she says few that are still competing are likely to speak up.
If it was a safer place for athletes to speak out without being reprimanded for doing so, I think a lot of athletes would come forward with their stories.
Former Olympians like skeleton gold medalist John Montgomery were quick to weigh in online, tweeting that he had mad respect for Humphries. A Hockey Hall of Famer and 5-time Olympian Hayley Wickenheiser also tweeted her support, saying Canada's loss is the United States' gain. Mark McCoy has walked the path Kaillie Humphries has embarked on. McCoy won a gold medal in hurdles for Canada at the 1992 Olympics. 4 years later, he ran for Austria at the Games. He says he understands why Humphries would move to the U.S. to compete.
Was basically hitting my head against the wall for 20 years competing for Canada, trying to do it on your own without any support. And finally, I went to train in the States. I went to train in Britain. I basically had to do it myself, and that was the only way I could win.
Jen Kish agrees that Canada's athletes need more support in and out of training. And she says there's no question who she'll be cheering for in the next Winter Games.
Absolutely, I will be rooting for Kaillie, and I hope the rest of Canada and her fans do too.
And Kish believes that many other Canadian athletes will be quietly cheering along with her. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Athletes Can, that's the organization representing Team Canada athletes, called out a broken system in its statement of support for Humphries. The Canadian Olympic Committee said it has offered assistance to both sides of the dispute, calling the situation extremely unfortunate.
Well, the election campaign is just days old, but it's already clear just how important it is for parties to vet their candidates, because whatever old online posts they miss, their opponents are bound to find. And as Katie Simpson shows us, it happened again today.
Andrew Scheer stood by his candidate running in a key Ontario riding, even though Arpan Kahana had to apologize today for a homophobic social media post he published back in 2010.
Thank you very much.
He's also defending this candidate after sharing an Islamophobic tweet from 2013.
2 local candidates that you mentioned here have apologized for their messages, and I accept their apology. I'm glad that they have done that.
Scheer was less forgiving of a third candidate running in Manitoba, firing him for Islamophobic comments he made online. While this is not what Scheer wants to talk about, by no means is this just a Conservative problem.
I find that unacceptable, and as I said, his position within the party is being re-vetted.
The Greens were caught off guard by an anti-abortion comment from one candidate and fired another for posting about sending a pig carcass to Muslims. The Liberals booted a Quebec imam over online comments he made on Israel. And this NDP candidate was dropped after flippant and aggressive words aimed at oil workers were discovered online.
There's no excuse for this to happen.
Some of these incidents were unearthed by other political parties.
I mean, clearly, if your opponent can find stupid things that your candidate said, you should be able to find them too.
Some voters, though, seem willing to look past older posts.
People do change. They might have said some things that in the past that maybe they regret because their views have changed.
I think it would depend on when they made the comment and how they feel about whatever it is they said now.
Sometimes, these things could get spun out of context.
Partisan research teams spend months digging up dirt on their opponents, waiting for the perfect time to strike. This will only become more intense as Election Day gets closer. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Brampton, Ontario.
And of course, all of that risks pulling attention away from the messages party leaders want to get through. Today, for the NDP, Liberal and Conservative leaders, those were focused on affordability. In Quebec, Justin Trudeau pledged to help out small businesses, in part giving grants of $50,000 each to 2,000 entrepreneurs a year to build startups. Also, ditching the swipe fee on sales taxes, which businesses pay for every credit card transaction.
Canadians created over 1 million new jobs in 4 short years, and much of the credit is owed to small business owners.
We know that cell phones are not a luxury.
In Toronto, Jagmeet Singh laid out the NDP's plan to cap the price of cell phone and internet services.
It's going to save families on average $250 per year, but it could be a lot more.
He says he'd also make it mandatory for companies to offer affordable, basic, and unlimited data plans. And Andrew Scheer is promising to bring back the public transit tax credit that Justin Trudeau scrapped 2 years ago.
So I'm so excited to be here today, standing here, to provide much needed relief to transit users.
Besides saving people money, Scheer says it'll increase ridership and help the environment. Now, here's a question. Is that really the case? Throughout the campaign, we're fact-checking some of the things candidates claim. And tonight, Evan Dyer takes a look at that one.
Andrew Scheer says the Conservatives would give a tax credit worth 15% of whatever a family spends on public transit.
We also reduce greenhouse gas emissions here at home. And that's why the Green Public Transit Tax Credit is an important part of our real plan to protect the environment.
It makes sense. More people on buses and trains, fewer people in cars, and fewer cars, fewer emissions. But the claim is misleading. The problem is, it's been tried before, and it didn't work that way. This tax credit was first introduced in 2006. It was popular with mayors and transit authorities, but 2 studies showed it increased ridership by less than 0.5%.
And our calculations showed that it cost about $3,500 in foregone government revenue to cause 1 more person to take public transit. To reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 1 ton, it cost government about $1,000 in revenue.
Rivers says that places it among the most expensive and least efficient carbon-cutting measures, comparing it to the current federal carbon tax at $20 per ton.
And so this policy is around 50 times more expensive than that policy as a kind of way to benchmark the cost.
So Andrew Scheer is right to say the tax credit did put money back in people's pockets, although a lot of that money went to people who were fairly well off. Because it didn't take people out of their cars, it didn't do much to cut emissions, but it did cost a lot of money, about $200 million a year. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
The National is back in just 2 minutes with jail time for a Hollywood actor. Felicity Huffman learns her fate in the college admissions scandal. We'll have details from inside the courtroom.
And a little later, what does it take to create a champion like Bianca Andreescu? An in-depth conversation ahead.
Welcome back. Let's go to the National's newsroom in Vancouver, where Ian is tracking other stories from across Canada tonight.
And Adrian, let's start in Ontario, where it's coming up to 10:17. A former deputy commissioner of the Provincial Police is filing a $15 million lawsuit against the provincial government. Brad Blair is suing the Ford government over statements the premier made, suggesting Blair broke the law by releasing confidential material. Blair also asked the courts to investigate the government's attempts to hire a longtime friend of Premier Doug Ford as OPP commissioner.
Public inquiry into these matters is the only path forward to adequately address the serious issue of cronyism that hangs over this government.
Ford denies that anything he said about Blair at the time was defamatory. Remember when people predicted legal cannabis would mean big profits for government? Well, not in Ontario, not yet, anyway. The Provincial Crown Corporation, which handles online sales and cannabis distribution, lost more than $40 million on sales of just under $65 million. The news comes as the latest round of new cannabis stores was put on hold after a judge granted a judicial review of the province's licensing process. An unusual protest in Ottawa today as women showed their support for a workplace harassment allegation at City Hall.
It takes a lot of courage to stand here in your bra, but not as much courage as it took for that woman to report Councillor Shirelli.
Protesters passed through all day, leaving bras in trees, sending a message of support to a woman who says she was harassed by Councillor Rick Shirelli during a job interview. She has filed a complaint saying Shirelli asked her if she'd be willing to go braless to some work events. In Newfoundland and Labrador, Cabinet Minister Perry Trimper has resigned over comments the local Innu Nation is calling very racist.
Everything just went blank. What I heard, the contents on my voicemail.
So after Trimper left that voicemail, the recording continued, and you can hear someone tell the former minister the Innu, quote, have a feeling of entitlement. Among other things, he replies, and this is a quote, the race card comes up all the time. Trimper has since apologized. He is still a member of the Liberal caucus. I'll be back in about 20 minutes with details about how dangerously sharp edges in some SUVs has led to a recall.
Felicity Huffman is heading to prison for her role in the U.S. college admissions scandal. The Desperate Housewives actor paid $15,000 to have her daughter's SAT scores rigged. Ellen Morrow has the reaction and what it could mean for the dozens of other parents facing similar charges.
A stone-faced Felicity Huffman did not answer questions as she left court. But inside, the actress was contrite, telling the judge, I broke the law. There are no excuses or justifications for my actions, period. The hardest consequence of those actions, a tearful Huffman told the court, her daughter's reaction. Why didn't you believe in me, Mom? Huffman said her daughter asked. Why didn't you think I can do it on my own? Huffman is the first parent to be charged in the college admissions scandal dubbed Varsity Blues. Another high-profile defendant is actress Lori Loughlin, who, unlike Huffman, has been defiant, pleading not guilty. With Huffman getting a 14-day sentence, some analysts say Loughlin should be worried.
Felicity Huffman is definitely the floor. She is the bottom because she has done everything right.
But is Huffman's sentence fair? Critics point to the case of Tanya McDowell, sentenced to 5 years in prison for enrolling her son in the wrong school district. TV judge Greg Mathis tweeted, remember when a black homeless woman got 5 years for using the wrong address to put her son in kindergarten? Why the difference? Huffman vowed in court to live a more honest life going forward. She'll begin her jail sentence on October 25th. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
And when we come back, the meteoric rise of a Canadian champion. From teenage underdog to top of the tennis world, an in-depth look at Bianca Andreescu's path to victory and how to replicate it.
And later, a woman with different sized feet puts out a call for her shoe twin, and she finds a match. That's quite the pair in tonight's Moment.
Welcome back. Sometimes, even on a story with twists and turns, complicated stories of sacrifice and triumph, you can still find a single photo, a single image that sums it all up perfectly. This is that photo. Bianca Andreescu's against all odds performance against one of the best female tennis players of all time, Serena Williams, at the US Open in New York City, exactly 6 days ago. And then, exactly 2 days ago, she said this.
I've accomplished a lot in this past year, and I feel like I can do even more in this sport. So I'm just gonna keep striving and hopefully win many more Grand Slams from now on.
She's aiming high, that's for sure. And don't forget, she is only 19 years old. So where does this resolve come from? Every Friday, we're going to take one topic in the news and try to break it wide open in a way that's interesting, insightful, and empowering. So this week, we want to try to answer the question, how do you create a champion? Now, appropriately enough, we have help with us here in studio, so let's just go around the table. We've got Donovan Bennett, host and writer at Sportsnet, Catherine Tamminen, associate professor of sports psychology at U of T, and we have Marnie McBean, three-time Olympic gold medalist and Canada's chef de mission for Tokyo 2020, which effectively means, I mean, for all those Canadian athletes who will be going to the Olympics,
Yep.
you're their leader, their mentor.
Mentor, mascot, whatever they need. I'm their girl. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just do a quick go around. If I had to put you guys on the spot and just, sum up what you think the key to Bianca's success is in one word, as unfair as that is.
Perfect.
Marnie, what would you say?
Natural.
Natural?
Natural.
Catherine?
Tenacious.
Tenacious. Donovan?
I was going to say fierce, but I'm going to say irrational.
Irrational.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about that in just a sec. Take a look at this. August 27th, 2018 US Open. Bianca's knocked out in the first round of qualifying. She's ranked 210th in the world. Fast forward to March 17th, following year, Indian Wells. She wins the whole tournament. Breakthrough victory. 5 months later, wins the Rogers Cup. Then, last Saturday, vengeance at the US Open. Not only breezes through qualifiers, but in the final, of course, beats Serena Williams in straight sets. So, our first question, how does she do it? Marnie, you said natural. For those of us who still hope to become champions one day, that doesn't bode well. So unpack that for me.
I feel like I'm kind of exploding, the whole panel here. So natural, organic. There's a huge part of an athlete like Bianca that is her. It's just always been her. It's her personality. But as natural, I think no one's gotten in her way. Like, it's just like a perfect field or forest of everything that's just untouched. And so no one has taken her raw talent and said, oh, but you should do it this way. And no one's taken her dialogue and said, oh, you should talk this way. You kind of really get the sense that everything she's saying is flowing through quite naturally. It's like this internal dialogue that she's letting us be privy to. And then the way she's playing, I think what makes us love watching her, it's almost like her eyes are unguarded as she's playing. And, you kind of just get the sense of her like, oh, I'm going to do this shot. Like, it's all very organic.
Catherine, you said tenacious. I mean, what sets her tenacity apart from that of every other elite athlete?
Yeah, the word tenacious, when I think of Bianca and the way she plays, it just strikes me that every time she plays, every shot, every match, every opponent, she seems to go into it with the same tenaciousness and competitiveness and that desire to win. And I also think of her tenacious nature in the way that she's dealt with injuries.
Donovan, irrational. You're going to have to explain.
Yeah. And I say it with love. I say it as a compliment. And here's why. You talk about the competitiveness and the love of competition. To go from 210, as you mentioned, to now top 10 and beat 7 people who are in the top 10 in a year, you have to be irrationally confident. Most people would have settled so many times along the way. Most people said, I'm injured. This is as good as I'm going to be. She has a next level thinking of, well, why not me? And I'm going to actually go after it. And that's why I think the difference between some of the GOATs and everybody else is they have a different mental capacity to think, this doesn't make sense, but I don't really care.
Okay, so here's the common thread. I think it's clear that everyone agrees that Bianca has a mental toughness to her, right? But let's try to work through that. Have a listen.
There's always going to be external pressure. I mean, I'm sure Canada wants me to do very well, and most importantly, I want to do very well. So I think that pressure really helps me, honestly.
So the question, how to win the mental game? I mean, and we're talking about pressure. Let's start there. Marnie, you're going to have a whole slew of athletes asking you for advice on how to deal with the pressure of the situation. What would you tell them?
Well, focus on the training and focus on the task at hand. And I think that's one thing that I really enjoy watching from Bianca. I know it's how I went from no golds to 3 golds. Is not thinking about the gold medals, was thinking about, for me as a rower, I just had to think about every stroke. And I think, you know, we hear from Bianca how she's done a lot of mental imagery and stuff like that, and also how she had a lot of time off. So the way she goes through dealing with all of it is every time she does a mental imagery, we don't think about bad strokes, we don't think about bad plays. And she's been in her mind thinking about playing Serena at her best, and how will I respond? How will I absorb what Serena, like what cannon Serena's gonna send at me? How do I absorb that? So I think the best way to accomplish great things, the mental prep, is by thinking about the task. The task takes care of the goal.
And Catherine, I'm trying to listen to what Marnie is saying, but with the hat of a parent too, right? And I'm trying to think, okay, so how does the advice change when you're dealing with your son or your daughter, right? And maybe they're 5, maybe they're 9, maybe they're 15.
Sure, yeah, and I think we see Bianca talking about meditation and visualization, and certainly if we're working with younger athletes, we're going to be starting with maybe simpler tasks or helping them to build self-awareness about the kinds of situations that they've been facing. What are some of the things that you found difficult in this last match? What did you do to deal with that? Was that effective for you? So parents and coaches can help athletes just by engaging them in questions about the match that they played or the game that they played or what might be coming up, and helping athletes to think through for themselves what was effective for you in dealing with that situation and providing some tips and guidance along the way.
I got to jump in on that one, because I have parents coming up to me all the time going, you know, my little Susie or my little Johnny, you know, gets to play select, but won't. And parents think they need to push their kids into these things. So you're saying listen to the kids.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to like stress this because parents make this mistake all the time. Kids who are going to be gifted at their sport, you don't have to push them at all. You need to help them find like balance and sleep and eat properly, because they're the ones who are going to be outside taking shots, and they're going to be the ones outside doing their sport in the rain, and they're going to be the ones waking you up in the morning to go to practice. And if that's not your kid, you have to, as a parent, reassign your goals, because they're not your kids' goals.
It takes a village. As they say, a champion rarely becomes a champion alone. I want you to listen to another clip from Bianca.
It's just so nice to have amazing parents like them, because they still treat me like I'm me, not like anything else. They've been handling everything super well, and they help me stay grounded, and I think that's very important. So I'm really grateful for that.
So the question, who does a champion need? And clearly parents is one obvious answer, one source of inspiration, motivation. Donovan, I know once upon a time, in your younger days, let's say, you were a burgeoning athlete yourself.
I was, yeah. And you know what, when I was young, I ended up playing football. That's the sport that I was most passionate about. But before that, I was an aspiring speed skater. And my dad had this beautiful dream that his 2 sons would be the first black speed skaters or win gold for Canada. He was the Richard Williams of speed skating at the time, except that I didn't like it, right? I wasn't very good. I was getting lapped. I was crying afterwards. And I quit. Eventually, my brother quit. And if I look back, I probably would have enjoyed the experience more if I had the level of focus and attention to detail that I later had in my football career. And I say all that to say, it wasn't just the parents giving Bianca the resources and helping her with the tools. Bianca wanted to actively be a part of that conversation, and at a young age, she had the level of focus to be engaged that much so early, and that's why she ended up being good. And with that comes pressure, but Billie Jean King, when she walked into the US Open, the plaque is there. Pressure is a privilege. From an early age, she was already putting pressure on herself. She'd write, "I've won" on her wrist. And so she wanted this for a long, long time.
But Catherine, I mean, for every story that I hear about kids who say, my parent, you know, like dragged me to this thing that I didn't want to go to, for every story that I've heard about like that, I've heard the opposite, which is thank goodness my parents made me persevere through that. I mean, how do you walk that line?
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? Because parents, I think, are wondering how much is too much. Am I providing enough opportunities? Am I doing too much? Am I overscheduling my kids? And I think the key things are to know your child, and you know what's best for them, right? You know that child, and if you are thinking this might be a little bit much, then that's probably a good indication that we can ease off a little bit.
I think, Donovan, you sort of nailed it. It's like when you said, I wish I had the focus then, is you just didn't find the sport you liked then. I think everybody's extraordinary at something, and it's just the lucky few who find what it is. And so whether it's, your dad, a parent, or coach, what is the village? What does the village need to provide to that athlete is a couple of good no's. Like, as in, if you surround yourself with people who are just, the term yes men, right? People go, oh, today was a good day. Like, oh, that was good today. Today was good. That doesn't help you at all, because you need someone who's with you who's saying, well, are you looking for good? No. Well, we're looking for great today. So no, that wasn't good enough today. But for, Bianca's parents, Bianca's coach, and even the way Tennis Canada has helped build around her, they've brought people in who are strategically aligned with how Bianca is playing and her strengths and her need to be with her family.
What a super interesting conversation, guys. We have to wrap it there. I mean, hopefully that was helpful for all of you folks or parents of people who want to be like Bianca. Worth noting real quick, especially for those people who are watching in the Toronto and Mississauga area, there is a rally in Bianca's honor planned for this Sunday in Mississauga's Celebration Square. Bianca will be receiving the key to the city. There will be an unveiling of a street sign, Andrescu Way, in her honor. And of course, we're going to have coverage of that event right here on the National on Sunday as well. I think there's probably a speed skating venue. The Bennett Dome, is that?
I wish.
I want to move to Mississauga. I think there's a Silk and Lawman Way. Now there's a Bianca Andrescu. I'm like, oh.
Marnie, Catherine, Donovan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We're back in 2 minutes with homegrown talent shining on a very different stage. Two Ontario brothers walking TIFF's red carpet. How they're now lifting up other Canadian talent. It is the final weekend of the Toronto International Film Festival, a last chance for celebrity sightings and star-packed red carpets. Well, tonight, the premiere of The Sky is Pink. That's a film by Priyanka Chopra Jonas, and she made it around the time she married singer Nick Jonas.
It was a really hard juxtaposition of real life for me, especially because I was getting married, and at the same time this film deals with loss of a child, which is such an unnatural way of being.
Based on real events, the Bollywood film deals with grief through humor and some beauty. Of course, TIFF has its share of international stars, we all know that, but the homegrown variety shine too. Two of those are Shamir Anderson and Stephan James, two successful brothers from Toronto looking to give back. Tashana Reid spoke with them about their efforts to support and promote Canadian talent.
It has been quite the year for actors and real-life brothers, Stephan James and Shamir Anderson. From the Canadian Screen Awards to the Oscars and Golden Globes.
Stephan James.
The best part? Being able to celebrate their success together.
It's been invaluable, I think, to us to be able to have each other. Now we get to motivate each other in a way that's just so positive. I want to hold you in my arms.
Younger brother James had a breakout year in Hollywood with a starring role in the Oscar-winning film If Beale Street Could Talk.
How do you feel?
And a Golden Globe nomination for his role in Homecoming opposite Julia Roberts.
The
25-year-old is also in a star-studded cast in upcoming thriller 21 Bridges.
You know who took your sister.
While Anderson is busy with TV roles in a new film at the Toronto International Film Festival, where he was recognized as a TIFF Rising Star, a title his younger brother earned in 2015.
To get that boost and to know that my brother did it is just like another, just another win for the family. To be coming back home and celebrating that is a true honor and a privilege.
Cheering from the sidelines every step along the way, their mother, Carmelita Anderson.
Our mom literally always saw us as stars when we were kids, before anybody.
But before landing in big budget movies, the brothers didn't always feel support from the Canadian industry.
There's also actors of color, you know, that come from this country, and we need to celebrate them. It's very, very important to have an example and have a beacon of light, because we didn't really have that.
Part of what me and my brother want to do is we want to find the talent here, the homegrown talent here, and show them the support now.
It's why they founded the annual Black Ball, now in its 4th year at TIFF, an event honoring diverse Canadian men and women making strides both on camera and off.
We need their voices and stronger, younger voices to allow people to realize how well we're doing out here.
It's important to also recognize how difficult the work is that we all do. It's not an easy world out there, and this is a very tough industry.
Which is why the brothers say they are just getting started.
I think it's what we always dreamed of celebrating this excellence and not letting it go unnoticed.
Supporting Canadian talent stepping into the spotlight. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
Ahead on the Nationals, starting a hockey season without a hockey league. The challenges for women's hockey in Canada and how the pros are fighting just to get on the ice. We'll see you in 2 minutes.
Welcome back to the National Newsroom in Vancouver. Ford is recalling more than 300,000 of its 2017 SUVs across North America. And the problem is within arm's reach under the front seat. More than 23,000 of the vehicles are here in Canada. The potential danger comes from a hidden sharp edge on the seat's frame. Dozens of people have already injured their hands reaching between the power front seat and the center console. And again, the model year is 2017. Teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg took her fight to the White House today.
Just never give up. We will continue.
The 16-year-old was joined by hundreds of other young protesters. They chanted, sang songs, and waved signs demanding immediate action. Thunberg says the United States has a moral responsibility to lead the efforts. It was her first high-profile event since she arrived in the U.S. 2 weeks ago on a zero-emissions boat. And British pop star Sam Smith making news tonight, revealing he considers himself non-binary. The 27-year-old has asked fans to use the pronouns they and them instead of he and him. Smith said via Instagram, this comes after a lifetime of being at war with gender. Smith has said they did not feel male or female, but somewhere in between. Back in 2 minutes with the return of the hockey season. For NHL players, that means training camp and contract fights. For Canada's professional women, it's a much different struggle. That's next.
Professional hockey is officially at work. That's because it's training camp time. But tonight, as we look ahead to the season, the National has a tale of two sports, really, because the contrast between men and women in Canadian hockey is stark. The men have teams, millions of dollars, and months of league play ahead of them. For most women, no league, no team, and no money. Elizabeth McMillan shows us how Canada women's hockey elite are still fighting just to get on the ice.
They have the speed and the finesse, but after the collapse of the Canadian Women's Hockey League, there's no pro league to test their skills.
The game is at a very high pace, so you have to train like that throughout the year in order to be prepared to play in those games. And without a league, you don't get the opportunity to challenge yourself in that area.
Normally, these players would have an entire season to look forward to. That isn't an option since the CWHL folded in March, citing a lack of funding and sponsors.
Hockey Canada is putting more money towards its women's program, and it wants to hold more camps like this to bring players together.
Players are also relying on a new professional association and a union to keep them on the ice. Unifor is sponsoring a showcase in Toronto. There are 3 other events planned in U.S. cities.
We want to see one league established that's going to be sustainable, that's going to offer a little bit of opportunity, so players aren't, paying out of pocket in order to play.
Brianne Jenner's former league only paid players between $2,500 and $10,000 a year. Jenner is confident she and her teammates have the energy and the talent to hook fans.
I think our game is the best it's ever been. We need that initial investment, I think, to take us to the next level.
That next level includes earning enough to train full-time.
You know, I'm not sure we'll ever see the equal pay as far as millions and millions of dollars, but just to be able to make a living, and a decent living, you know, I think right now that's all we're after.
Players say a stake is ensuring professional hockey will still be an option for another generation of young women. Elizabeth McMillan, CBC News, Liverpool, Nova Scotia.
So while the women fight just to stay in the game, there is breaking news of a very different kind about the men of the NHL. Young star Mitch Marner held out until today before signing, get this, a 6-year, $65 million contract extension with the Leafs. CBC Sports' Jamie Strachan tells us in the NHL now, this is the state of play.
We don't want to think about going into the season without Mitch on the roster on opening night.
For Toronto Maple Leafs general manager Kyle Dubas, it's the unavoidable training camp topic.
Marner moving in, shoots, he scores!
Mitch Marner is looking for a big payday.
I would feel a little differently, I think personally, if there weren't other situations around the league that were sort of in the same stalemated position.
Bassett with a wrist shot, scores! Marner shoots, scores! Here's Marner, scores!
Dubas is right. A number of Canadian teams are currently locked in tense multi-million-dollar contract talks. In Vancouver, it's Brock Besser. Winnipeg has a pair of stars unsigned, Patrick Laine and Kyle Connor.
Players want a bigger piece of a pie that continues to grow. Consider this, in the last 12 years, NHL revenues have doubled. Recently, Seattle paid $860 million for an expansion franchise. Ed all the way around, banks it off the boards to Weidman.
At the same time, players see this growth continuing to ramp upwards and want short, lucrative contracts.
When they get their free agent status, then they think that's when they're gonna hit pay dirt. And so they don't want to be locked in.
There's a lot more money coming down the pipe. A new gambling deal means hundreds of millions, and a rich new television deal is on the horizon. And if you're a star player in the NHL, it's a great time to be on the ice. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, when we come back, 2 women in 2 provinces, each with 2 different sized feet. Together, though, they're a match. We'll explain. Our moment is next. Meet Janine Maynard and Jessica Gray, strangers in separate provinces sharing a pretty unique trait. Feet that are completely different sizes, as in one foot is size 9, the other foot is size 7. Now, just imagine what shoe shopping might be like. You'd have to buy 2 different pairs, different sizes. It might get pretty expensive. Well, Gray started looking for anyone else in her position, and ended up being interviewed by CBC's Sudbury. That spread all the way to Calgary, where unbeknownst to her was Maynard. Same problem, mirror image. A shoe twin, you might say. Well, their connection is our moment tonight.
So you know who you're talking to. Really overwhelming to see the webpage with our pictures side by side and like seeing the feet and everything. It was like, oh my God, I feel seen yet so vulnerable and like in the best way.
I'm just really excited to not only get a new shopping partner, but like a new friendship out of this. Visually, not a lot of people will see me as disabled, first off. And when I approach like managers about this in stores to maybe like get a discount, because it's hard for someone in their 20s and 30s to spend $350 on one pair of Nikes, technically. That because they don't visually see it, it almost feels like a discriminatory thing. And so she said that in her article yesterday, and I was like, yes.
I'm not the only asymmetrical human. I'm not the only one that's suffering in silence. I'm not the only one that has to deal with all this shame on a daily basis. Like, I feel like I finally have a sense of like, maybe this did happen for a reason.
So this is a great, if not unusual, story. And you know, in both cases, they told us there are medical conditions that have led to this asymmetry, as they put it. But good for them. I mean, a little bit of ingenuity, some creativity, and some exploration, and they managed to find each other.
And one little kind of maybe a procedural point I would like to make. We often talk about social media driving stories and reunions and all that sort of stuff. This was CBC Radio. This is CBC Radio in a small city that did the first story. That spread and connected to a CBC Radio show in a second city. And then our web page did the story with the two of them side by side. So a little shout out for some CBC media.
Connecting the country, it's what we do, and clearly they've got a lot in common. I've sort of been reading, and happily they have the same taste in shoes. That's going to be important, and they both, it seems, endured this by buying the bigger size and then stuffing the other foot with toilet paper and big socks, but those days are done. That's the National for Friday, September the 13th. Night.
Good night.
Night.